Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the worlds of the 15th century. Section 4, Civilizations of the 15th Century, the Americas. This is an examination of the civilizations in the Americas, but it moves beyond the city-state model of the Maya that we learned about in Chapter 6 to the imperial structure of the Aztecs and Incas. The political systems of each of these large American empires provide a good model for the comparative study of the techniques of imperial rule in the Americas. And so that's what Section 4 is an examination of. Okay, the Aztec and Inca established, or were established by once marginal peoples who were basically taken over and then absorbed older cultures. And so let's start with the Aztec Empire. Mexica was they were a semi-nomadic people who migrated southward from northern Mexico, and they established themselves on an island in Lake Texcoco by 1325, and built themselves a grand center and established a capital city of Tenochtitlan. This tribe was, like I said, present-day northern Mexico, settled here by 1325, and over the next century is when they really built up their power by military service, alliances, and constructing this capital, Tenochtitlan. And later they claimed descent from the more prestigious line of the Toltecs and Teotihuacan. They formed the Triple Alliance in 1428, and Mexico and two other city-states were then united. They launched a program of military conquest and conquered much of Mesoamerica in under a century. And those Aztec rulers, like I said, claimed descent from earlier peoples like the Toltecs. Tenochtitlan, it was a capital. It was a large city of approximately 200,000 inhabitants. Like I said, set on that island in Lake Texcoco. It had canals, causeways, markets, floating gardens known as chinampas. And I'll spell that for you. Chinampas. It's some ugly handwriting. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, they were stunned by the city's sophistication and acknowledged that it was far superior to anything in Spain. And the conquest state and these market centers that were here at Tenochtitlan they were a conquest-based state that required tribute from its conquered subjects, and tribute came in the form of goods for those markets, and the elite luxury items, and even human slaves. Now, the Aztec Empire was loosely structured. It was actually a rather unstable conquest state, and had an entire population of roughly 5 to 6 million. And those conquered peoples were forced to pay regular tribute to the elite and the emperor. And like I said, Tenochtitlan was very large and heavily populated, but they did participate in local and long-distance trade on a vast scale. And that trade included slaves. Many were intended for sacrifice. Human sacrifice was much more prominent in the Aztec Empire than the earlier Mesoamerican civilizations. Tlaclaclel, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, probably not, is really credited with crystallizing ideology of the state, giving human sacrifice its importance. He lived from 1398 to about 1480. And human sacrifice was common in Mesoamerican history, but the Aztecs took it to a whole new level. He was a prominent official that promoted the idea that the god Huitzilopochtli needed human blood to rebuild his strength for his constant struggle with the forces of darkness. And so these massive ritual sacrifices were performed even as a political function, even though it was a religious ritual, and really impressed the enemies of the Aztecs, and also promoted fear. And so thus a very important physiological or philosophical ideology was created along this poetic tradition that was focused on the fragility of human life. And here is a map that shows you, in orange, massive area of mainly hunting and gathering peoples. And in green, those village farming peoples, even some over here. The chiefdoms, right, those mound builders that we've learned about, and even the Iroquois Confederation we've learned about. And then good, solid, state-based civilizations like the Mesoamerican civilizations of the Aztec and the Maya and so forth, and the Andean civilization. We'll get to the Inca Empire here in just a minute. I like that they put some of the cities on those state-based civilizations like Tenochtitlan, so you know where it is, and even Chichen Itza for the Maya. And of course you can see Machu Picchu and Cusco here for the Inca Empire. Okay, the Inca Empire. Quechua speakers established the Inca Empire along the length of the Andes Mountains on the Pacific western coast of South America. The empire was approximately 2,500 miles long, with around 10 million subjects. So it was rather huge. The Inca were similar to the Aztec in that they were a small marginal group that came to rule a large empire and used previous precedents to justify their rule, but the Inca had a much larger territory than the Aztecs. And the Inca were definitely more bureaucratic and centralized than the Aztecs. And the emperor was an absolute ruler and was regarded as a divine leader. And the state theoretically owned all land and resources. There were about 80 provinces in the Inca Empire, each with a governor. And the subjects were grouped into hierarchical units of people, 10, 50, 100, 500, etc., at least in the central regions. And there were inspectors that checked up on those provincial officials. And population data, as sophisticated as that is, which wasn't done in some of the other civilizations in the Eastern Hemisphere, but that census data was recorded on what's called quipus, with knotted cords. And there's a massive resettlement program that moved a lot of people a lot of the population to a different region. The state bureaucracy and the resettlement and these Quechua speakers had, like I said, a much more developed and invasive state bureaucracy than the Aztecs, because they generally left their people alone except for when they wanted tribute or sacrifices. And the Inca resettled large numbers of those conquered people and encouraged the use of Quechua as a language. And so they tried to assimilate people into their culture and their civilization. And almost everyone was required to perform labor service, or what's known as mita. The Inca did not require human tribute for sacrifice like the Aztecs did, but they did require a work tax, if you will, and that's what the mita was. Some women were taken from their homes. They were raised as elites, and they even got married to Incan officials. And so some of the things that they do were work on state farms. They'd herd, mine, provide military service, or even state construction. The Inca actually their centralized government became involved in major public works projects, especially their in terms of food production. And the state, in return, would provide these elaborate feasts for those that performed this mita. And so it was definitely a trade-off. It was their way of saying, thank you, look what we've done, let's celebrate it, that's good stuff. And so many people over time began to take pride in providing for the state. They liked, of course, the reward with these feasts, but also they were very pleased with what they had done and took pride in that. And so the state also played a larger role in the distribution of a lot of those goods that they had produced than the Aztec had. Now, both the Aztec and the Inca, basically, their civilizations practice what's known as gender parallelism. You've heard me talk about that before. It's not necessarily gender equality. This is where women and men operate in separate but equivalent spheres. So they have different jobs, different spheres of existence, but those spheres are equal to each other. And while the Inca system was not equal for the sexes, they had their own spheres in, like I said, this parallel structure. And the tasks of each gender were valued. There were parallel religious cults for women and men, parallel hierarchies of females and male political officials, especially among the Incas. And women's household tasks were not regarded as inferior. They were valued. They were seen as important. Still, men were the ones that had top positions in political and religious life. But there was a glorification of the military, probably at times would undermine that gender parallelism and that system of separate but equivalent spheres. And the Inca ruler and his wife governed jointly, as opposed to the emperor or the ruler having sole power. And they were seen as descendants from the sun and the moon, respectively. And here is the scene. I love this picture. It's a great view. I mean, look how beautiful this is. Look at the height of the elevation of this. I mean, this is a civilization where people lived 500 years ago. So let's describe the scene of this abandoned Native American site in the Andes Mountains. Okay, this is what's known as Machu Picchu. Maybe some of you have been here. They actually provide tours here. It's high in the Andes. It's actually about 8,000 feet in elevation, so nearly a mile and a half, or basically a mile and a half up. It shows the high mountain ranges and the steep mountain walls, including a distinct-looking dome-like peak behind the ruins of the building, or buildings, which is really neat. And so let's talk about what the scholars assume was the purpose of this site. And why might they think that? Well, many historians and scholars believe that Machu Picchu was most likely a royal retreat or some type of a religious center, but not a regular commercial village, administrative site, or even military installation. This is a sensible assumption when we consider how difficult the site was to access. So it's highly likely that it was a religious center as opposed to a commercial, administrative, or military location. And it was actually only discovered by the outside world in 1911. So it was there for 400 years before it was seen by the outside world. It's such an elevation and such isolation. There would have been few commercial, military, or administrative uses for Machu Picchu, which indicates the religious center. On the other hand, the high altitude and awe-inspiring surroundings, like I said, would invite religious contemplation or the possibility of celebration of some of those leaders of high rank. But it's an awesome picture, beautiful background. And they give you an idea of the size of a lot of this. As you can imagine, I mean, look at some of these, trees. So this is rather large. Obviously, some of this is eroded away, and you can't see the ceilings to how large some of these structures are, but I believe there are some people right down there to give you an idea of how large this is. Absolutely beautiful. And in case you hadn't figured it out, Andes Mountains, Machu Picchu, Inca Empire.